We recently got this question from one of our subscribers, and it says, I never see any flare-ups when you grill. What's your secret? Well, King Kale 0034, I'm sure glad you asked, because today I'm about to break it all down to you. Welcome to Daddy DIY Grilling. If you're new here, my name is Keith, and this channel is all about exploring the craft of grilling. I've been grilling since I was about yay high. I absolutely enjoy the craft. But what I enjoy more than grilling is being able to share my experience with you, with others, so that you can enjoy the craft just as much as I do. Continuing to level up, continuing to be a student of the craft, continuing to enjoy the fruits that come from the grill. That's the good eats, being able to share that and be a blessing to your family, your friends, your customers, whomever. So if that sounds good to you, definitely hit that like button and hit that subscribe button. But yeah, today we're about to get into flare-ups. That's right. When it comes to flare-ups, if you watch my videos, both on and off camera, I don't deal with a lot of flare-ups really. And so don't think it's just me editing out, when the flare-ups happen. I can honestly say I really don't deal with flare-ups a whole lot. But that's because I have a strategy. It's almost like something I do just by instinct now, but I do have a strategy that I use to help me reduce the likelihood of flare-ups happening, and when they do, I know how to respond. So let's talk now about what a flare-up is. A flare-up is when you're cooking a food and the grease from whatever you're cooking, the fat is going to start rendering, and those drippings are going to hit your coal bed or hit your fuel source. And when that happens, that's what we call grease vaporization, right? Happens. Those drippings then vaporize, and that's going to go back and help flavor your food, right? Those are the aromatics that we absolutely enjoy when we're grilling. Well, one of the byproducts of that could be a flare, right? Typically when that happens, it's just a sudden burst of flare that doesn't stick around. It's just a whoosh, and it goes away. However, if that flare has or finds a fuel source to fuel it, it is not just a sudden burst, it'll stay. And sometimes it's isolated, but if it finds a fuel source, it could spread. It could take over your entire grill. And there's a point where a flare up can become a grease fire. And you may have seen this before, YouTube videos on it where, a flare up takes over the whole grill, and now we have a grease fire. So as grillers, as folks who pit masters, smokers, people who spend time on the grill, this is definitely something that we need to consider. So let's talk about now who flare-ups impact the most. And I think flare-ups impact the most are people who grill direct, right? People who grill with their proteins, their food in close proximity to the coals, right? If you're smoking meat, you're cooking indirect, chances are you're not going to deal with any flare-ups per se. Any flare-ups you have, they should be, off to the side, and you got your proteins over here and it's not impacted, but it could cause temperature fluctuations in your grill. So this is primarily going to be folks who are grilling and they got the proteins close to the fuel source or directly over the fuel source. So that's who probably going to be impacted the most by flare-ups. So now we talked about what a flare-up is. We talked about who was impacted. Now let's talk about what my secret is, what my strategy is. And the way I handle flare-ups is I keep the following in mind, and that's PMR. That's right, PMR. The P stands for prevention, the M stands for management, and the R stands for response. When it comes to flare-ups, I told you that flares are going to happen just as a result of the grease vaporization process. The problem is that if those flare-ups find another fuel source to spread to, then that's what can impact us and take over our grill. So prevention, and the number one thing you do is you keep a clean grill, right? You'll see me before grilling sessions. Sometimes I do this on camera, sometimes I do this off camera, but I'm scraping the walls of my grill. I'm getting all that residual grease, those fats that have rendered from a previous cook. I'm scraping the walls of my grill. I got a little putty knife I keep in my deck, my supplies, and I'm scraping all around. I'll brush that out. I'll get all that out of there. I also pay attention to my grates, right? I'm cleaning my grates, front side of my grates, and I'm also looking at the back side of my grates. because sometimes the backside of your grates can get overlooked and that grease can jump onto the backside of the grates, and that can help fuel a flare up. I'm doing that. So I do that every cook. I'm paying attention to those things as far as prevention. And also, a couple of times throughout the year, I'll do a deep clean on my grills. This is where I get my pressure washer out, get me some Dawn soap, cut through all that grease, spray them off real good, let them air dry, and then I'll come back and season them up, bake in some of that oil, right, to prevent rusting. So those are some of the things I do for prevention and some of the things that you need to consider as well. So now we're to M, right? PMR. We talked about prevention. Now let's get into management. So with management, think about it now. We're to the point where we're ready to put these proteins on the grill. And management starts right here. And I've mentioned this to you before. You don't put your protein on the grill, your food on the grill, until you're confident that fire has calmed down and it's ready for you to start cooking. I liken it to a boxer, right? Before you throw your first blow, punch, make sure there's an opening, make sure there's an opportunity for us to put our protein on the grill and this grill not just burn it all up. Because if you throw your blow at the wrong time and put your proteins on the grill at the wrong time, maybe your fire hasn't calmed down. Maybe you're still a little edgy. Maybe there's some residual grease or fat that you missed, right, that are on grates, that are on the walls. Because as good as I try to keep my grill clean, there's many times where I miss something. And that flame, just from the coals being on, I haven't even put my food on the grill yet. But just because those coals are hot, I just poured them out the chimney. They may jump on the walls of the grill. They may jump on the grates. That's not a time to put your food on. Close the lid, let the grill calm down. Then when that coal bed is calm, that's when you go in and throw your punch or you put your food on. So the first thing to management is to know when to put your proteins or put your food on the grill. All right, so we've got our proteins on the grill. Now we're into the cook. How do we manage this cook so that we are preventing flare-ups from happening? What are we doing here? One thing I'm doing is I'm reading the grill. I mentioned that to you a whole lot. I'm watching the coal bed, seeing how aggressive is it. Is it calm? Is it aggressive? I'm hearing how aggressive my fire is, right? I'm listening for the sizzle. I'm reading the smoke. And also, when it comes to managing the grill, we got to talk about flipping and rotating and how that's a critical piece in this as well. So why do we flip and rearrange our food? Question for you. I'll give you a minute to think about it. If I'm grilling, let's say I'm grilling hamburgers, right? Why am I flipping and rotating? Why is that important? Now, if you said for doneness, hey Keith, you're doing that to even out the doneness, right? You don't want one side to cook longer than the other, obvious, right? Well, yeah, that's one reason. But there's another reason that gets overlooked. I do a lot of direct grilling. And during the early part of a direct grilling session, why I flip is for fire management. I'm flipping because I have this protein directly over this coal bed. And what did I say about flare-ups? Flare-ups, we have to be mindful of the fuel sources that we're giving them. So this fire is looking at these proteins I have over them as a fuel source. So I have to keep this fuel source moving and rotating so that this fire just doesn't consume this food and not only burn it, but give it fuel to where now it's roaring, right? It's burning unchecked. So my flipping is a way that I keep the fire in check. Okay, bam. I'm grilling some hamburgers. So as I'm reading the hamburgers, I'm listening for how aggressive the sizzle is, because that sizzle is grease vaporization that's happening. I'm listening for flare-ups. I hear them there. Poof, poof. I'm looking at the smoke to see how my smoke is picking up, because I know if the smoke is picking up, I have an active flame on the coal bed, right? Because it's going to burn dirty, and I need to go in there and flip. So early on in the cook, I'm not thinking really about doneness. I'm thinking about fire management. Hope that makes sense to you. So when it comes to management, it's about timing, knowing when to put your proteins on, managing it from the jump, and also as we get into the cook, knowing when to flip, knowing when to rotate, when to rearrange, because that protein is a fuel source to this fire. And we have to keep it moving so we keep any flare-ups in check and hopefully prevent them from happening in the first place. So far, we talked about prevention, we talked about management. And for the most part, when I do those two things, I don't really have to worry about flare-ups, right? But now let's talk about what do we do in the event flare-ups happen. And when I say I don't really worry about flare-ups, I don't keep a water bottle, I don't keep a spray bottle, I don't keep a douse bottle next to my grill, because I'm taking care of the P and the M, right? The prevention and the management, to where I don't rely on that. Now let's talk about how do we respond, or how do we react in the event we have a flare-up. And we got to be very careful here, man. When you're dealing with grease, what you don't want to do when you have an active flame or flare is to spray it with water. Just go watch videos on YouTube of what happens when people take an active grease flare-up or fire and you add water to it, right? That can exacerbate the issue, and now you have made it even worse. So please be careful and be mindful of that if you're spraying your coals down with the spritzer. Now, if you're spraying a coal bed that doesn't have an active flare-up, I know that's a technique some people use. They may spritz the coals with no active flare-up, right? Be mindful of that, but just be mindful and be careful if you're going to do that. So I don't rely on water. I don't rely on spritzer. I don't rely on a douse bottle. What I do in the event I have a flare-up is, again, I am going to move my fuel. These proteins, this meat is my fuel, and I've got to move it. I've got to relocate it. And my confidence that I can deal with it is because I know I've taken the steps in the prevention phase and the management phase to where we should be able to deal with it without having to get the fire extinguisher, baking soda, sand, or whatever else, right? We should be able to deal with it. And when I mean deal with it, if I see a flare-up happening, what's going through my mind is that I got to move these protein. I got to get it out the way. I got to move it. Then I'll stack it up to one side of the grill. I'll close my grill and let it die out. Now, one thing we got to think about flare-ups, right, is not only fuel, it's air. This is not the time to keep your grill open while you sitting here slow rolling, slow poking, trying to figure out what's going on. Make a move, relocate the food, and close it, right? And monitor. Monitor means when we close it, we should see our smoke activity kind of die out as that flare-up dies out. I'm listening to help ensure that sizzle, the aggressiveness and the pace of that sizzle should slow up as well, right? So I'm going to relocate the food, relocate the proteins to move them, so I'm not providing this flare-up with a fuel source. And then I'm closing the lid, and I'm going to monitor from there. And typically that's all I need to do. That's all I need to do. But again, it's all predicated on you having this strategy. Prevention, management, responding or reacting, they all go together. They all go together, man. There are times that I've seen people deal with flare-ups, right? I'm over at somebody's house, they're grilling, they're dealing with flare-ups, and come to find out their grill is dirty. They don't grill that often, right? They got grease on their grill that's from probably last year, because they just don't fire it up that often. And gas grills, man, are some of the worst, because they get hot so quick and they come up to temperature so quick, and you have that concentration of heat, and then, man, you can be full up flare up to a grease fire just like that. And then if you have windy conditions, that makes it even worse, because now you got this fresh oxygen that's fueling the fire. So you definitely have to be careful with flare-ups. But just remember, have a strategy, PMR, keep that in mind, and I think that's going to help serve you to help you decrease the likelihood of flare-ups happening, and when they do happen, you'll know how to deal with them. Well, thank you so much for hanging out with us today. If this video helped you out, if it was a blessing to you, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and also I'm going to drop a link down in the description below for you to get signed up to our newsletter. This is a newsletter that I send out weekly. It's intended to help you get the most out of your grilling game and also get the most out of your grill. So until next time, grill boldly, serve proudly, and enjoy the process.